Thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Andrew. I'm co-founder and CEO of Reason Automation, for those of you who don't already know me. Our specialty is helping brands spend less time on their Amazon financial data and analytics and more time actually getting insights and taking action on that stuff. And so, of course, we're very excited to talk to you about AVN, being that it is a monumental annual event that stresses everybody out. As Joe was just elucidating, it was even stressful for us as vendor managers on the Amazon side. And so we're really excited to meet with you and show you some of the tools that we built to help make that process a little bit easier. Really quickly, Joe, can you give a quick introduction and tell the audience about your experience?
Yeah, my name is Joe Shao. I am one of the co-founders here at Reason Automation. My background was Amazon. I was there for 3 years as a vendor manager, first in office products and then in tools and home improvement. After I left Amazon, I helped brands help the brand with their business on Amazon. And it was during that time where I was like, why is it so stinking hard to report on my business? And so Reason Automation was really born from that business need of brands and agencies needing their data in a way that was scalable and easy to use.
Yep. Joe and I worked together in the office supplies business at Amazon, and so that's how we know each other. It was one of those 1+1=3 situations. We said to each other, we need to figure out a way to work together, and it took us 10 years to find that opportunity and then start Reason. David, how about you, sir?
I'm David. I lead BI and analytics here at Reason Automation, and my most relevant experience will be 7 years at Amazon, 3 of those as a vendor manager, senior vendor manager within CE, although it's musical instruments, which is a very special corner of CE, followed by 2 years on the FBA team where I worked on the team that sets pricing for FBA around the world, and then finally 3 years in devices doing marketing type roles. Yeah, like Joe and Andrew, I think a lot of that time had a through thread of being the person who needed to kind of sort out analytics for the team at Amazon. There's a common misconception that everything is kind of laid out for you, at least in those days, when in fact you would have to often build your own tooling for the job that you needed to do.
Exactly. And now he's leveraging that expertise for us here. David is the primary driver of the tool that we're going to show you today. And so anytime you have hard questions, make sure to let me know, and I'll make sure to make him answer them, not me.
And just a reminder, questions can be submitted through the Q&A.
Yep. And you can do it anonymously. Feel free to do that. All right. So diving in, what did we build for you? We built you a tool that aggregates all of your vendor data, whether that's retail analytics, your remittance data, invoices, purchase orders, etc., and creates a unified view of your financial performance for the prior year, as well as year-over-year trends and changes. And so starting with a full view of your total picture from your sellout and your sell-in, this bridge shows how you performed according to a lot of major KPIs that Amazon cares about. Because we're former vendor managers, we know that you care a lot about ensuring that you're making Amazon happy while still needing to manage your own needs for the business. And so this tool tries to help you straddle that line between meeting Amazon's request while finding opportunities for you to push back in value accretive ways for your business. And so this first screen here is looking at product level performance for the top 3 KPIs that Amazon brings into every negotiation. They always deep dive into other more niche areas depending on your business, but they're always going to start by looking at your total revenue measured as shipped COGS with its year-over-year growth, and then how well you stayed in stock as measured by procurable out of stock, and then of course their margin or net PPM and how that's evolved over time. And so what we've done here is helped you calculate all of this not only at the product level, but then allow you to map this to your own categories, subcategories, and tags so that you can roll this data up at the category level and start to understand trends through your own organizations. It's called category and subcategory here, but we're seeing a lot of our early clients use this very flexibly for any grouping that they want, whether that's product lifecycle, product line. Some folks are using it to do parent ASINs and manage all variations together that way. Or to slice and dice via attributes that they know are important to them, like which country of origin did the products come from, or how recently did this product launch, etc. In this case, what we see here is that this category, or I'm sorry, this business, 53.9% year over year in terms of shipped revenue, or some shipped COGS, but that the growth was not driven equally by all of its categories. So we've calculated a contribution to change metric for you. As a reminder, for those who aren't familiar, what contribution to change is showing is how each of these line items contributed to that total 53.9% year over year growth. Basically, 53.9% year over year growth is equivalent to 5,391 basis points, where a basis point is 1/100th of a percent. And that lets us see how many basis points each of these categories added up and contributed there. So let's sort by contribution to change for shipped COGS growth. And we can see that the majority of the growth was driven by this trundles category, or a little over 14%, even though from an absolute revenue perspective, it's relatively small compared to some of these larger categories. And that means that this is probably a relatively new category for the brand. They probably invested quite a bit of effort launching and accelerating products here. And it's a good place to focus the negotiation when you're looking for opportunities to drive more strategic investment. And if they're looking for more margin accretive investment opportunities, this is an easy place to point to. We've also calculated contribution to change for you on the profitability and the net receipts metrics here as well, so that you can in parallel see which categories or products are driving the most for these other metrics as well at the same time, just by glancing. We also know that a lot of you are the Amazon experts, but that your stakeholders are not necessarily immersed in the Amazon channel the way that you are. So we also made this a little easier to translate for your other stakeholders. So first, we allow you to map not only to products, your products categories and subcategories, but we let you give them friendly titles so that you don't need to report using Amazon's crazy customer optimized, search optimized titles. You can use whatever simplified versions you want, like product X, color Y. And then we also let you map to SKUs so that if your team doesn't speak ASIN, they can actually review your reporting and your insights at the SKU level using identifiers they already understand. And last, and certainly a super important concept to cover here is even if you're only selling in one marketplace, Amazon lets customers pay in multiple currencies. And that means that in your financial data, there are records in multiple currencies. For example, if you're a US vendor, your customers can pay in Canadian dollars as well as Mexican pesos. And that means that there are co-op transactions in your reporting that are still in Canadian dollars and Mexican pesos. And in order for you to get a true sense of how all of those things add up as a proportion of your business, you need to convert them. You can imagine that if you treat Mexican pesos and US dollars, actual currency values as the same, that there's I think a peso is currently 1/20th of a dollar. So that's a pretty significant difference in the insights that you might be getting. So what our tool does is David built in historical daily currency exchange rates for every single currency pair. And now you can actually convert every transaction that Amazon reports into one of the three major currencies, whether that's US dollars, euros, or pounds. So here, for example, we're looking at US data. So there isn't going to be a huge change as I change to US dollar, but I can change it here to euro, and it immediately converts that into euros. And instead of using a single static peg rate, we actually did build in those historical daily exchange rates so that this is about as close to accounting grade accurate as you can possibly get without knowing Amazon's actual bank rates. We're also seeing this be helpful if you are, for example, the US division of a European brand or vice versa. That this is a good opportunity for you to align reporting with headquarters, however they want to see it. So if you're a UK company and reporting on pan-EU business, maybe you want to report on this in pounds, and you can do that very easily here. Joe or David, anything to add here from your perspective before I keep going?
Just that looking at if you do have a business that's cross marketplace like that, you really want to restrict yourself to looking at one of those converted currencies rather than the raw data, because the raw data could potentially have mismatched currencies, therefore not appropriate to aggregate that in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So strongly recommend that you use currency conversion into one of these currencies just to smooth out any of those unusual extra currency co-op transactions. All right, but from there, this is just sort of to help you understand where your business stands in 2024. But then to look at the actual negotiation points from Amazon, let's start looking at your co-op program. So what we've done here is aggregate all of your co-op investments with year-over-year changes broken out by sell-in versus sell-out. And we start with the sell-in side because these are the terms that most brands focus on negotiating during AVN, whether that's your co-op accrual, your damage allowance, or your freight allowance. You can't see it in this demo data set, but if you sign up with our tool, if you pop this open, you'll be able to actually see each individual agreement and how that billing has changed year over year. This is a great way to audit Amazon's actual billing activity because even though this co-op accrual was probably negotiated at 10%, we can see that the actual billed amounts vary, and it may be worth understanding why and how. And then certainly we can see here how has the actual rebate amount and the percentage of net receipts that that rebate represents evolved year over year. In this case, we can see that overall their co-op investments changed about 10%, but that the big change here was their freight allowance going up 34% year over year. That number stands out to me. I don't actually have a benchmark for how much freight costs went up in 2024, but the very first thing I would do if I was this brand is go look at that and investigate. Did freight costs go up 34%? If not, then is there opportunity for me to negotiate a lower damage allowance, or I'm sorry, a lower freight allowance going into this next year? But perhaps more importantly is the sellout co-op side, because Amazon doesn't make it easy for brands to understand what their total investment is in lowering prices for customers across all vehicles. So what we've done here is aggregate all of that for you and collect it by agreement type, whether that's something like a VIR, straight payment, coupons. In this case, this business has a subscribe and save component, so they have subscribe and save coupons. And here you can see, again, how much is that as a percentage of your total business? How much has that changed year over year, and what is the actual absolute amount? This allows you to make sure that you are understanding how your total investment in lowering prices for customers has changed across all the vehicles, and also so that as Amazon makes requests for increases in your base terms, that you are considering where and how your total spend to put money in Amazon's pocket has changed year over year, and that you look at these things as part of the same picture. From there, you can deep dive into both the sell-in and the sell-out side of co-op. So starting with the sell-in side, we give you the opportunity to look at how your co-op agreements as a percent of net receipts have been billed over time, but then giving you the opportunity to audit this. So a really common question that we get from our clients is, how do we validate whether or not those co-op rates make sense? And you can't do this with every single agreement type, but certainly with your damage allowance, you can compare that to the actual customer return rate. And that's what we've done here. Now, your damage allowance, of course, can pay for things other than just customer returns. It also pays for things like damage in transit, et cetera. But this at least gives you a benchmark to understand how far off your actual negotiated allowances versus your actual customer return rates, and how that may have evolved over time. So in this case, we can see that the brand's customer return rate has been increasing, but their damage allowance has not been. So I might expect Amazon to come knocking around that this time. But then also drilling this down to the product level so that you can start to understand, are there specific products or even categories where the customer return rate is wildly different than the damage allowance? And here we can see that, yes, there is. So we see that the wingdings category here has a higher customer return rate than the damage allowance. So if Amazon isn't already looking at this, I imagine that they're going to come asking about it. But when they ask for a higher damage allowance, you can make sure to push back and say, we don't think you need a higher damage allowance across categories. We certainly see it for wingdings, but it's quite a bit lower in some of these other categories. Can we start to talk about damage allowances that are different across those, or use a blended rate that correctly honors the fact that our return rates are lower in some of these other categories? Joe and David, anything to add here?
No, I think the ASIN level is particularly powerful. Being able to identify if it's even just a singular ASIN that's driving, and then I think anytime in a negotiation you can come up with something that you can quote unquote give back ahead of time and know that you can give back, puts you in a really strong position to be able to say, hey, look, we understand why you're asking for X. We understand that it's Y. And then this is what we're doing about it. And then that can then sideline, like whatever asset they're trying to ask for. So
exactly. Proactivity, I think, is oftentimes really hard for brands to value in terms of, does it make sense for us to proactively reveal things that we found in the data? But there is an element of partnership and positioning that Amazon does value. I mean, they are humans at the end of the day, and vendor managers are certainly humans. A lot of you I know are dealing with brand new vendor managers and oftentimes net new to Amazon this negotiation season. And I think that a lot of them will appreciate true partnership going into this season, even though historically that may have been less true. And I realize also that maybe it's a hard ask given the way that Amazon usually negotiates, but somebody's got to be the bigger person. All right, switching over to the sellout side, we give you an audit tool for this side as well. So where you've lowered prices for customers. Since these aren't pre-tuned accruals for the most part, the analysis is a little different. In this case, what we've done is show you how has your growth in sales compared to the growth in customer co-op that you've paid. And so in this case, starting with this table, I noticed that, wow, that customer co-op year-over-year percentage number looks really, really big, and then it trails off to be flat or even negative. But if I look at the actual amounts here, it doesn't look like there's been a really, really significant change, certainly not on the magnitude of 20,000% to 50%. And so what probably happened is we're comping a small number in 2023. This brand is probably relatively new to doing price promotions and anything involving lowering prices for customers. It looks like they probably started in Q1 of 2023 and ramped up and have now hit a relatively normal level of spend. And when we look at this graph here on the right, which shows the actual amounts changed year over year, that hypothesis plays out. This teal line of customer co-op investment looks like it's basically flat and even trending a little bit down over time, while the light gray line of shipped COGS is going up and to the right. And what that tells me is that this brand is doing a really good job with their promotional investment because they've managed to keep promotional investment relatively flat over time while still seeing greater and greater COGS growth. That's pretty tough to do. And actually what that suggests to me is this is probably subscribe and save spending, because you can spend consistently on acquiring net new subscribers. And if that offer and your retention are tuned correctly, then you can spend that same amount acquiring new subscribers while seeing overall subscription revenue move up and to the right. Then to Joe's point, looking at this at a product level is always really, really helpful. So here we can see it at a product level or at a category level. Where has your actual percent of COGS spending changed year over year the most? And so we can see that here sorted by magnitude, but we can also flip that and see where it's gone the other direction. And the idea here is not necessarily that you should be worried about overspending here, but our guidance is that you should make sure that the amount that you're spending is exactly what you expect. There are often strategic reasons to be spending a lot of money on driving and accelerating sales for a SKU, particularly if you're dealing with cold starts. So just make sure that you're losing only the money that you expect to. All right. But one of my favorite tools that David built here is our PPM review. Amazon is constantly focusing on net PPM, and of course, that means brands do as well. And we've helped brands understand a little bit more about how PPM gets calculated and where they might have pushback opportunities. So what this tool does is, first, it shows you how your PPM as a total business has evolved year over year. Pretty basic stuff, graphed both visually month by month over time, and then in a table showing you that same information numerically. But then we built you an audit tool. And basically what this does is we know what Amazon's net PPM formula is. It's shipped revenue minus shipped COGS plus all your vendor terms minus sales discounts, all divided by shipped revenue. Amazon publishes this formula, so we know what it is. We also get Amazon's actual net PPM data from Retail Analytics. So straight out of the API, what did they tell you your net PPM was? We translate that into actual currency, or PPP. But then we also take all the inputs to net PPM and recalculate it manually for you to compare against what Amazon says your PPM is in Retail Analytics. So we take your shipped revenue, your shipped COGS, all of the vendor terms and all the sales discounts that we can detect, calculate what your actual profit should be, and then show that comparison versus Amazon's calculation. And you can see that in many cases, there is a really big difference between what Amazon's profit calculation is and what ours is. Those are unattributed sales discounts and unattributed straight pay agreements almost exclusively. Unattributed straight pay agreements are, for example, if Amazon was doing really aggressive price matching, then came and yelled at you later and said, make us whole, write us a check for £50,000. You said yes. They collected that money, but it didn't attribute it directly to specific ASINs. Then that can cause a PPM gap like this when you're looking at it at the product level. But the other big driver is unfunded sales discounts, or in other words, price matches, almost always. Whether that's directly price matching in the buy box or one of the other mechanisms that Amazon uses to try to get parity, like those small inline coupons that they sometimes offer self-funded in order to create parity with drugstore in-store coupons, etc. So what our clients have been doing is using this tool to not only audit Amazon's net PPM calculation, but to find products where this gulf is really, really large and make sure that they understand why that gap occurred, that it matches their own understanding of big price match events that happened in the past year, and that they bring this information into their negotiation. Because if Amazon comes asking for a lot of PPM increases and they point to these products, then now you, instead of just saying yes, you can point to the price match activity and have a channel conversation or an assortment conversation instead. David and Joe, anything to add here?
I think I would add, there's obviously some wiggle in our ability to nail this net PPM calculation. There are a fair amount of things we don't know, but it really, I think, serves well as kind of an audit and benchmarking tool to make sure that you're at least in the same ballpark as Amazon. And any gaps can then perhaps be put to them in the form of questions to say, well, this is what I'm seeing from my side. Can you help me understand why this gap might exist?
Yep. And that specific language, I think, is really good to take into your negotiations. I always hesitate before being that prescriptive, but instead of saying, why did this thing happen this way, asking Amazon to help you understand a discrepancy that you see really reframes it as a partnership conversation instead of something that's adversarial. The last thing I'll show you on this page is that just like every other report we've seen so far, you can combine this at the category or subcategory level so that if you're looking at margin across products and you need to understand where to focus in a large catalog, that we make this a little bit easier for you. It also helps you identify themes more readily of what might be driving that gap in profitability. For example, if you see a really big gap with one category and you know in advance that you have more channel problems there, then you can go into your negotiation ready to talk about that. All right. We have a couple of other slides here, but I'm going to try to get through them very quickly because I want to leave as much time as possible for Q&A from the attendees here. So one thing that we do is help you understand your other costs of business. Amazon is really focused on PPM, but PPM doesn't always include all of the inputs and outputs to your profitability. Including things like chargebacks and shortage claims. So we built screens to help you start to understand those costs because we know they're important to you and they impact your earnings, whether or not Amazon is actively negotiating for them. So in this case, we've shown you how your overall chargeback performance has evolved year over year and its impact on your business. You can see over time here how much your chargebacks were as a percentage in net receipts. In this case, it looks like the business stayed under 1%, which is great. But then we show you this at a product level so that even though the business stayed under 1% in the aggregate, we can understand, are there specific products that had a lot of chargeback issues? So here we've sorted by the absolute value of chargebacks, and we can see, yes, there are some products here that had 2, 3, even 4, or whoa, almost 8% of their receipts lost as chargebacks. Anybody who's tried to dispute these knows it's not really necessarily worth the effort to dispute 50 to 100 pound chargebacks individually with Amazon. But noticing these themes by product can help you understand where to investigate upstream in your own supply chain. Like, what are these chargebacks and why do they keep occurring? And how can we solve for them operationally, as well as bring this information into our negotiation with Amazon. Again, switching to category view, we can see if there are any particular outliers looks like in this case, there are some categories with bigger problems than others, but that there were much bigger swings when we looked at it at a product level with those 2, 3, 4, and even 7% numbers compared to at the category level. It seems like a much smaller spread and mostly under 1%. And then bringing all of this together, it's really important for us, having been on both the Amazon side of the table and now on the brand and service provider side of the table, to help you understand your cost of business on Amazon, not just theirs. Amazon is always going to come to the table negotiating through their priority lens, PPM, growth, et cetera, and their own strategic priorities. But we think you should never, ever lose sight of the overall profitability of your Amazon channel. And its relevance to your overall business. So what we've done here is created a cash accounting view of how your actual margins performed on Amazon net of everything, whether those expenses are included in PPM or not. So here we see what were all of the payments and expenses, so your income and expenses from Amazon last year versus this year, and how did that evolve? And then we've actually calculated what was the margin that you made on your business. So this last year, this business had a 63.7% margin, and you can see exactly where that money went. We can also see that this year, their margin went down to 58.5%. And what's interesting here is because we've been able to calculate contribution to change, a lot of times brands, when they see their margin contraction, they get distracted or they rat hole on things that feel controllable, like chargebacks or returns. And what we're trying to show brands is that oftentimes the biggest drivers are other areas of your P&L. And in this case, we can see that of that 518 basis point decrease year over year, almost all of it can be attributed just to shortage claim and price claim deductions. In other words, this brand saw a 5% increase of their cost of goods sold in the amount of shortage claims that Amazon hit them with year over year. And either that means that they need to start getting a lot more active with disputes, or that these claims are valid and they may have a very significant problem in their purchase order operations and confirmation operations that they can solve. This is taking a look at it aggregated in 1 year, but the last screen that I'll show you is we like to help brands understand this performance over time and certainly past the AVN period. So one of the tools that bridges this AVN tool with our normal analytics suite is this monthly P&L. It's taking that same cash accounting view and breaking it out over time so that you can see how your profitability and all of those expenses has evolved over time. This is the summary view to try to make it a little bit easier to grasp. We've rolled up as much co-op and chargeback information as we can. But if you're looking for more detail, you can quickly switch to the summary, to the detail view and see a much more granular breakout. You may notice that because Amazon likes to extract payment terms, that it takes a little while for your P&L to fully settle, typically 60 days if they have 60-day terms. And that's why the profitability of this business looks pretty bad in the current month, but pretty healthy the further back that you go. And so this is just your last tool and your last opportunity to make sure that any trends and observations that you've made elsewhere in the tool, how are they trending over time? That's it. That's our AVN tool end to end. The goal here is, again, to help equip your sales leaders and their support teams with as much information as they can about how their business has performed financially across various aspects, to give you the ability to slice and dice that business through whatever categories, subcategories of their tags that you need, and then to help you present that information not only to Amazon, but to your other stakeholders internally by through currency translations, categorization, SKUs, and friendly titles. Joe and David, anything to add before we start looking at questions?
I'd just like to say, I think the cost of business slide is my favorite slide because it's really easy to get caught up in kind of individual agreements and subsets of the negotiation, whether it's marketing co-op or damage and freight and those kind of things. But really what you need to keep an eye on is your overall cost of doing business on Amazon. And This screen lays it out really well and helps you remember that, at the end of the day, all these activities add up to a set of deductions that come right out of your profit. So that's why this is my favorite slide.
I hear you. As I've done individual brand demos, this has been an aha moment for a lot of folks because, again, to my point, Amazon is so focused on PPM that brands often find themselves taking on Amazon's priorities and deprioritizing or even forgetting their own margin. And that means that Amazon can brush under the rug a lot of these other P&L leaks until you happen to notice later on in the year. Joe, you want to guide us through Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it. I got a few different questions here, and we'll roll through each of these. Cool. So one of the first questions was, I'd like to understand how beneficial having an audit of Amazon deductions, things like shortages, chargebacks, and accruals would be. I'd imagine that there might be some leverage for a vendor in the AVN, for example, if we show that there's a million possible erroneous deductions to recover. I'll take this one. I think, yes, there's definitely a benefit to this in that it's always a point of negotiation, especially if you're not getting responses that you need from Amazon to help you be able to deep dive into how to fix those specific issues, whether it's shortage, chargebacks, and whatnot. A good scenario for this would be like, and actually I've had this happen where they're like, hey, we're getting hit with way too many chargebacks. I don't have budget for any room for negotiation until we fix this, right? And then that then gives gives you leverage and it gives the vendor manager some motivation to help you solve whatever problem that might look like. Andrew or David, you guys want to add to that? Cool. Next question is, I wonder if there are any benefits in these negotiations for a vendor to have a marketing solution driving off Amazon traffic to their ASINs. Is there a way that they could get better rates off co-op ads and whatnot? So I would tend to say that from a Amazon vendor negotiation perspective, and also from a VM's perspective, knowing that you're driving traffic is sometimes a beneficial thing, but also knowing what you're driving the traffic to is extremely important. So if you're driving something that is CP negative or has a really bad PPM, those are definitely things that you want to be aware of, and this tool would definitely help as well. So next question, is it possible to categorize chargeback by type, reason, and display that way rejected? Might have missed if you've already shown this.
Yep, and I think Ryan said disregard because we answered it.
Oh, sorry, and yeah, it's on the P&L page. That way, everyone else also sees the answer there as well. So,
yep.
Next one, Amazon is pushing more 1P vendors into AVS programs. Where do you capture the spending? Also, Amazon takes into account advertising spend as well. How would you frame this investment alongside this new tool?
Great questions. David, can you take the AVS question?
Yeah, sure. That should show up as a straight pay. So while it wouldn't be attributed at the product level, it would appear on sellout co-op as a categorized under straight pay. And for actual live data, you'll be able to blow out that row to see the individual agreement play out by month.
Yep. So it's definitely included in the tool. It's captured as part of the PPM calculation and as part of our co-op deep dives. Great question. And then one of the more popular ones that I hear, Amazon takes into account advertising spend as well. How would you frame investments alongside this new tool? This is a really good question, and I'm going to give a somewhat disappointing answer as I say it depends. It's a little bit of a cop-out, but I'll add a little more color to that right now, I promise. So everybody has been spending more and more and more on PPC year over year. And every year, Amazon vendor managers carefully try to ignore your investments there because it doesn't directly contribute to their PPM number and they don't consider it part of their profitability. But at the same time, we and they all know that advertising dollars are extremely profitable for Amazon, and that if everybody were to stop advertising, that Amazon would be very upset. And that means you absolutely have leverage. So Unfortunately, the specific methodology for doing this and claiming value for your ad investments is going to depend on your business, your vendor manager, the particular context of your negotiation. But what we've seen is that the polar opposite sides don't work. So if you try to claim 100% value for your ad spend as though it was a co-op investment, vendor managers will not even entertain that conversation typically. Um, it it ends up being a non-starter and it can be somewhat distracting, but they absolutely will care if you bring to the table that you're threatening to throttle advertising spend as a lever in the negotiation process. So if you know in advance that you are willing to either stop ad spend or redeploy it to another platform, or maybe even to a portion of the business that your vendor manager cares less about, that is a lever in your pocket. In terms of the actual financial impact and how can you tune the exact amounts, that again, I think is going to depend so much on how your particular VM and their category leader value that advertising investment. It also, I think, depends on how high level your negotiation is. For some brands, the negotiation is directly with a VM. For others, it's happening at a much higher level with a cat lead and potentially even with somebody from Amazon ads. And in those instances, you can leverage the fact that Amazon's leaders have different goals and oftentimes competing priorities to your own advantage.
Cool. Next question. Have you ever seen Amazon overcharge and undercharge co-op fees over a period of 3 to 6 months? And the answer to that is yes, we absolutely have. And we absolutely seen these in longer periods as well. And yeah, and definitely over across longer periods. A couple of reasons for why this occurs on the overcharge. Sometimes a new co-op agreement gets created while another one doesn't get sunsetted. And so that's always something to be proactively tracking once co-op is updated to make sure that you're not being overcharged. On the flip side, you can also be undercharged if someone updates a co-op agreement incorrectly on the back end. And yes, that happens, especially if you have really complex co-op agreements that have filters. That can also occur as well.
I think it's really tempting for brands as they do their own co-op audits here to focus on the overcharges, but it's really, really important if you're going to do this kind of audit and bring this to a negotiation table that you also capture undercharges and you don't wait for Amazon to bring them to find them first. In part, I think it strengthens your case because it shows that you've done all of the work, not just your work. And it makes it harder for Amazon to push back. But also that, once you've asked the question, it makes it more likely that Amazon is going to ask the question on their side as well. And it increases the odds that if you have only pointed out overcharges, not undercharges, it increases the odds of a post audit and even more follow-ups downstream.
Cool. Next question, co-op advertising question. Is there promotion agreed throughout the year, like buy with Prime or Amazon advertising spend?
And they corrected to Prime Day.
To Prime.
Yeah. So I will say that this is an area where the fact that all three of us have not been vendor managers for at least 4 years is probably going to date our information a little bit. But in our time frame, sometimes these things were negotiated in advance and sometimes they were not. It really depends on the level of investment and the size of your brand and the special strategic considerations that you're looking for. So for example, with Prime Day, we typically were not negotiating deals super far in advance, but we were negotiating things like sponsorships and more unique marketing activations very, very, very far in advance, oftentimes as part of AVN. And you can certainly secure and ask for concessions around marquee sales events as part of your negotiation. Very often, that's something that Amazon likes to give you because it doesn't have a hard cost for them necessarily to give you placements all over their website or features in some of their outbound emails or a banner in one of their live activation events. Those sorts of co-marketing things allow them to claim a lot of value without a lot of expense.
Yeah, and I would also say when I used to negotiate, this would definitely be something that people would bring up. And so one of the arguments would always be like, hey, I don't want to increase my co-op percentage. Can I spend it instead in promotional activity And then we would talk through what those promotional activities might look like. I also think that one of the understanding the drivers of why vendor managers ask for co-op is usually because they're trying to hit some sort of margin figure on their end. And so like understanding things within your business in terms of like where that is probably best deployed, I think is really important as well. So like are we investing in margin rich product and helping that stuff grow, in which case then the next year negotiations, like we look freaking awesome because our business grew, Amazon's margins grew, versus like are we pushing a product that is just bleeding money left and right, that can also create long-term negotiation issues. So just being aware in terms of like how you're growing the business, and what the vendor managers actually asking for when they're asking for co-op.
Great point, Joe. Particularly your point around promotional spend. I was talking about it mostly through the lens of like merchandising and ads, but promo spend and lowering prices for customers absolutely counts, and is a good lever to include in your mix as you talk about commitments.
Yep. Next question: how can we manage AMS slash DSP marketing spend increases during AVN with Amazon when they do not hit the VM's P&L? Great question. I think this is one that is a little bit of a case-by-case scenario. And there's a little bit of a I guess unofficialness to like how it benefits Amazon in the back end. In general, I think it is definitely something that you can always bring up to VM, be like, hey, we're investing in AMS and DSP. This is how much more we're investing, and because of that, I don't have budget for X, or for your ask for this. If we pull this over, then we're going to be spending less on AMS and DSP. I think Amazon purposely separates these two negotiations, i.e., to try to extract more value from a vendor. And so, in the same way, you could also leverage that aspect in terms of making them competitive versus in that they're basically competing for the same dollar and allocation.
Yep, exactly. And there was a related question from somebody else that I'm going to add up here. During the negotiations, this person's vendor managers, they've had 4 and 4 years, kind of typical, sorry, have consistently stated that advertising spend does not have an effect on the negotiations. What is your opinion on how to get this point across to the VM? And in addition to what Joe just said, I think it's really important to double down on that competitive aspect. If you are spending enough on ads that it impacts your ability to invest on retail, then you probably have an account manager on the PPC side or somebody who is responsible for your spend levels. And it's important to try to bring that person into the conversation or to make them aware of how that conversation is going, because they have completely separate goals. They have a completely separate VP. They have different levers and different mechanisms. So even though your VM states that advertising spend does not have an effect on the negotiations, you can bet that if it endangers somebody else's business in the right way, that there's going to be a negotiation that happens, whether it's with you or between Amazonians in the background. Personally, when I was in retail, I had a lot of friends in ads, but I didn't have loving relationships with them because of this exact reason. If one of my ad sales counterparts sold $1.5 million display package, then that $1.5 million was going to suddenly disappear from the negotiating table the next year. And I personally, as a vendor manager or a marketing manager, really wanted that money in my GL, in my P&L. And so whether or not the vendor manager is saying it doesn't matter, there's always going to be a way to make it matter somehow. I think that the last point I'll touch on here is that to your point around 4 vendor managers in 4 years, that it cannot be emphasized enough that this is not a relationship game. And that your goal of this negotiation is not to make this vendor manager happy, not to develop a cordial relationship with them over time. That may pay dividends periodically, but that it's really impossible to tell how long you'll get ROI from an improved relationship there, because your vendor manager is probably going to rotate out. Even more so now with the 5-day RTO push and a lot of the morale thrash and just general role change stuff that's happening because of that. It's never been more true. And so instead, really try to make it as depersonalized as possible, and don't hesitate to pit Amazonians against each other if it means the right thing for your business.
Yep. I'll add another thing is Amazon's also likely going to try to tap into different budgets in your company. And that's also something to consider on your guys' end, which is like the marketing budget's the marketing budget, but the trade dollars are the trade dollars. And how one, you probably want to keep that opaque to Amazon. That benefits you from a negotiation standpoint, but also understand that that's what Amazon's actually also trying to do, is they're trying to tap into different budgets on your end, and how you decide to manage and what you decide to tackle that between your teams is definitely an area to help you maximize the negotiations as well. So
great point, Joe. The different budget buckets conversation.
This is a great question. We have a few VMs for different categories on Amazon. Can this information be grouped in multiple categories so we can see totals per VM per business unit? I'm going to say yes, you can. So in the categories filters, that's actually something you can load up. And so you can actually create different categories on how you want to view them. And so you can split them up by the different VMs, and then it'll automatically flow through the tool.
Exactly. So just jumping back over to our actual tool here for a second. Our intention with our categorization capabilities was to enable you to slice and dice the business through either your own categories or Amazon's. So you can use this category tab, for example, to analyze based on your categories, and then use subcategory to align it with VMs or business units, and then very quickly jump back and forth between how you want to look at the business through your lens versus Amazon's lens.
And that's all controlled via a text file that you upload. So you could, for instance, add custom titles if you want. If you don't, then it'll fall back to the Amazon stock title. You can upload any category or subcategory or SKU value that you want within that file.
Exactly. All right, we've got one more here.
When you guys aggregate this data, do you look back 4 quarters? Will it update every quarter?
Great question. So what we actually do is we are running updates on this data every day, because our service and our analytics are not just focused on AVN, they're also focused on year-round business management. We check Amazon multiple times a day for updates to all of the data sources, whether that's retail analytics or purchase orders or something else. And it's looking back not just at quarters, but at days, weeks, months, etc. So we're trying to keep this as up to date as possible. Going forward, if you were to sign up with this tool and then use it, you get access not only to this AVN tool, but also to our ongoing business review dashboards and profitability suite. I won't go all the way into these, but just as a quick preview, we also have a lot of other Amazon style analytics that help you answer a lot of these same questions on a week-to-week and month-to-month basis, so that you're not just considering questions around profitability and category performance once a year, you're considering it throughout the year.
And as to the AVN specifically, we have 2 years of data in there, so it's focused on 23, 24, so you can look at year over year. Going forward, we're definitely going to be figuring out how to make this product live on. Might need a little bit of work, but I think the quarterly level is the right way to think about it. So we'll be adding data by quarter, because if you get in more granular than that, a lot of this co-op data and the interactions start to look really choppy. So we'll definitely be working on quarter level views so that it lives on going forward.
Perfect. All right, we got one more question here.
For stakeholders within the business, a common question I got was, what's the relationship between sell-through and sell-in to Amazon? Any way to use this tool to answer that question?
That's a really good question. I think that there's no screen in this tool that's deliberately designed to show that, but that this is the right mental model to take from when you're thinking about analyzing it, which is that your sell out drives your sell in. And that ultimately, while a lot of sales leaders focus on sell-in and what Amazon is ordering from a PO basis, that it is equally important to think about how Amazon's total business is performed and how sell-out is performed. The way that we bridge that a little bit in this tool is through this total full year funnel summary. So this page is really more about Amazon's KPIs than it is about yours. The only vendor focused KPI here is net receipts. Everything else here is really from Amazon's perspective. How much of your product did they ship? How well did you stay in stock? How profitable was that product? And in this way, our goal here is to show you those key sellout metrics alongside a sell-in metric so that you can start to piece apart the story of what happened with sellout. And then as you step through all of the various financial audits that are more focused on the sell-in side and what happened there, that you can start to create and find the story for yourself.
Yeah, on a more simplistic basis, I would also say like your net receipts and your ship COGS in general should be ideally fairly lockstep with each other. The way that Amazon wants to be as lean as possible. So like the framework I usually work with is whatever they're selling out, they're going to try to sell in, assuming that the inventory level is at the level that they want it to be at. So if you start seeing massive discrepancies between your sell in and your sell out, I would look very closely at inventory at that point and say, hey, what's going on with inventory? But like a good general rule of thumb would be like whatever your BLT is, that's likely the amount of inventory that you want Amazon to have on hand, and that probably is going to be very close to the delta between your net receipts and your COGS growth.
Yep. To take that even one step further, if you start to see that delta grow, and for example, Amazon's net receipts outpaces shipped COGS growth, that's a sign that they're over ordering. And you should expect either those orders to slow down or for Amazon to come knocking and asking for cadence funding to help them lower prices and mark down that inventory to exit it faster for customers. And that's kind of a lose-lose proposition because not only are they ordering more, sitting on it more and letting their holding costs increase, but then they're coming to you to ask for more margin to lower prices on product that you weren't really prepared to sell anyway. All right. That was all the questions we received so far. We've got 5 minutes left. So if you have any last questions, we'll hang around here just for a little bit longer. Please feel free to submit more questions here. If you don't have any more and you're interested in learning more about our tool, please feel free to contact me, Joe, or David directly, or you can email sales@reasonautomation.com. And we will follow up with you as soon as we can. If you are on our website, you should be able to jump directly to this product from our solutions section. There's that AVN Toolkit up there, and the page looks a lot like this. It'll have screenshots of everything we covered today. Just the last couple of things to talk through that we didn't get questions around. Does this work for other countries? Yes, it absolutely does. Hopefully that's clear from the currency conversion and whatnot that we showed earlier, but this works for any marketplace that Amazon does business in. And then does this work for multiple accounts? The answer is yes. We are about to release an update that allows you to view this exact screen, but aggregated for multiple accounts or marketplaces into one unified view.
We had a question about, would love to know if we do anything for forecasting.
Good question. So really quickly today, no, we do not. That said, forecasting is and other predictive analytics are extremely hot topics for us going into 2025 because as the quality and granularity of our data become even better, that's the use case that we're here to enable. What we're still debating is which of the more popular forecasting models make sense for us to deploy at scale, and can we actually find forecasting models that make sense for the full range of our clients, or do we need to build different models based on category, subcategory, et cetera? We kind of think it's going to be the latter, so that means a lot more work and a lot more time before we're able to launch something. That said, because we get all of our performance data by day, by product, by program, by distributor view, et cetera, at the lowest granularity possible, a lot of our clients are already using our data for things like AI, ML, and forecasting, price optimization, et cetera. All right. I think that's it for questions. We're going to call now. So thank you again, everybody, for your time today. It was really great having you. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to follow up with us directly. Otherwise, we're looking forward to hearing from you, and we hope your AVN season goes really, really well.